Hi all, let's have a look at the encounter of Vladimir Kramnik against Topalov in the London Chess Classic 2016. This is round 1. Knight f3. So Kramnik is choosing kind of non-theoretical lines sometimes. This is just fianchettoing the bishop basically. So don't have to learn tons of theory to play this necessarily. After d4, knight f6, this position has a lot of games from it. c4 is the standard move, and usually black plays c6 here, which doesn't seem too exciting. For example, this continuation, maybe knight e5. This is the most trodden move, knight e5, in response to knight e4, and we could symmetrically get symmetrical kind of transactions like this, and it looks very, very drawish and dull, like a World Championship game. That would be eligible for a World Championship style game. But no, actually Topalov, to his credit, he plays a very interesting move, c5. Is it double-edged though? Does it incur too much risk? White actually plays a very interesting move in some respects. D takes c5, capturing away from the center. We have d takes c4, now knight a3, and black usually is wanting to damage white's structure, but there's something quite clever in this position. By the way, it's known to be worse here in my book. That knight e5, although it's been played quite a bit, is actually known to be slightly better for black after queen c7. It seems the knights are stumbling too much. Black's knights are more centralized. This looks like a good position actually. Black also has some potential attacking intentions. This is actually a lot better for black. So yeah, there's interesting ideas here that yeah, knight e5, although it's been played, hasn't worked out very well. So knight a3 was played. We have now c3, trying to damage white's pawn structure, but the clever response is actually to ignore this. If it's taken, then queen a5 as an example would collect the pawn and celebrate the damaged pawn structure. But we have actually a clever move. I wonder if you can guess it. Instead of taking that pawn immediately, what do you think is played here? If I give you 5 seconds. And it's worth noting, if you're playing these sort of positions. Okay, I think it's pretty nifty. Knight b5. Yeah, knight b5. And now this is much nicer, I think, for white. This position is a small edge. And after queen b3, there's ideas like rook d1, knight e5. We have, of course, this bishop coming out to attack b7 as well. Black tries to safeguard that diagonal. But this is still an unpleasant looking position for black here. We have queen c8, and this just doesn't look right, this opening. Now it looks as though white's got everything he wanted from playing in a quiet way. He's got a nice position. We have knight bd7, knight bd4. Yeah, really threatening to take, because then unleashing this bishop, it's uncomfortable. Bishop d5, we have queen a3 protecting the pawn, but also you'll note that c6 is possible in some cases, and in fact, yeah, c6 is played. It's a beautiful position to play, it seems. If b takes, knight takes, this is looking horrendous. There's knight takes e7 here to win the queen. So if takes, knight d4, and white ends up with a big position here, winning material. So yeah, that's a really unpleasant move, c6. It's going to unleash the power of this fianchetted bishop. We have knight b6, and white gets this big pawn on c7. Yeah, something's gone horribly wrong for black. You might think, hold on a sec, isn't knight c4? Before we have a look actually at c7, which seems entirely logical and understandable, there's a computer idea in this position. I can only describe it as a computer idea. Just to quickly show you, knight g5, computer picks up as slightly problematic for black in all variations. Let's quickly check knight c4. That's not something I've noted. Knight c4. Yeah, this is why it's a computer idea. There's a queen sack here with bishop takes d5. Well, it gets loads of pieces. If king here, this is just massive. Yeah, I'll be winning the queen. Yeah, so knight. So this computer idea is for knight c4. It zaps actually knight c4 because the bishop takes d5. So if knight takes, we just take on c4. And yeah, if the queen sack is accepted, it's really like +6 even this position. Bishop e6. Where's the queen going? I think the thing is the c7 pawn can be played here. Ouch, with a big advantage. Yeah, this seems to be completely slicing black. So knight g5, knight c4 is ruled out, and on bishop takes g2, this position with the aggressive knight on the 5th is really dangerous. If h6, there's a knight sack, and this position is massive for white. It seems a disaster is occurring. So yeah, in all the variations after knight g5, it seems like there's disasters. Yeah, this one, knight f7. But anyway, that's the computer variation stuff. But in the game, yeah, knight c4 was invited. Nevertheless, this is still, from a human point of view, very uncomfortable for black. Although black is getting that dark square bishop. Yeah, it looks as though, and in a way, it looks. Hold on a sec. Well, the thing is, the overriding thing is this gigantic pawn on c7. This fawn here in black's side. Yeah, I don't think there's a great thing to be gained from pinning the knight here. In fact, b6 was played. What does black actually do with that gigantic pawn on c7? Let's check here. If knight e4, actually there's just knight. Okay, knight g5. Yeah, knight g5 here is horrible. Nasty pin on the bishop on d5. If takes, yeah, we take here. This is a big position. And if here, we can take here. Yeah, it's a gigantic position. Okay, so I think, yeah, black played b6. Black is in trouble. Queen a3. So there's a lot of pressure here. We have e6, which does weaken the dark squares. You might think, well, hold on. Okay, there's bishop f8, but isn't black volunteering even more weaknesses? What does he do, actually, after queen a3? If we have a quick look at this position, what is black actually doing? First of all, what is also white threatening? I know there's a gigantic pawn there. What is white's threat? Let's just check for a moment. White's threat here, it seems knight e5 actually might be on the cards. If we give black a token move, knight e5 here, and we've got things like, well, queen b3 on f7 again. Yeah, there's that f7 pressure. So maybe black was concerned about shielding the diagonal as well. But for sure, now it's clear that after knight b5, knight d6 needs to be parried. Bishop drops back, but now the queen hits f6 in return. Like a bit of tennis here, defending against the shots. But now queen d2 is played. And you might think, hold on, doesn't this go into a tempo gainer? I don't know how useful it is, but maybe it's worth checking out. Isn't there a tempo gainer in knight e4 in this position? Okay, queen d7 was played. Let's have a quick look at knight e4 here. Is it really so bad? Well, let's have a look at queen f4. Then there would follow things like knight g5, yeah, on f7, potentially, and e4. So I don't think it helps black, this position. This position doesn't help black. There's things like queen takes e4 here. Okay, but let's look at the game then. So I'm not sure knight e4 helps black after queen f4, because we're still looking at f7 there. So queen d7, hitting b5, that's protected. In fact, knight e4 is played now, so we get similar ideas. Queen f4 with ideas of knight e5 and g5, and we're looking at f7 and kicking the queen away from there. Yeah, it looks unpleasant. We have a6. This does allow queen takes e4 with that pin after a takes. Queen d3 now is played, which reveals e4 as a threat. White doesn't have to worry about his a pawn when e4 is on the cards here. Black tries f5, but guess what white plays, which actually finishes the game at move 28. Quite a crush, actually. Can you see what white can play here, which is really quite crushing? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, knight g5. It's got this big threat of knight takes e6 because of that gigantic pin and the danger of the diagonal here. Black is helpless. Let's check out a few possibilities. If here we take on e6, now this is horrible. This is extremely horrible to lose the queen, or we could take with the rook and just be losing like this instead. That's disgusting. It's horrible. Horrible. After knight g5. I don't know what black does, actually. That's why black resigned. It's this knight e6. If, say, king here, we just take on e6. If we're crashing through like this, it's gigantic. This pawn is now gigantic. Example, we can take on a8. If the rook moves, where does the rook move? Well, we can play bishop b7, and then we're going to take on rook d8. Yeah, it's just, this is no good. This is no good. The exchange down, the king's restricted. It's helpless. That pawn's winning. So knight g5 is actually a knockout. Believe it or not, knight g5 is a knockout blow. It's a bit of a strange game to see such a quick game. Topalov is 2760. Yeah, it just shows these are human ratings. Computers don't get murdered in 28 moves usually. The computer versus computer games are very different. But when we're talking about human ratings, yeah, I mean, weaknesses, taking risks, just getting zapped quite quickly here in 28 moves after knight g5. There's just no answer to knight e6. No answer. I mean, we're just going to take on e6. It's interesting. It's interesting. Kramnik was able to get such a big advantage, but there were some clever tricks he used, like knight b5. I mean, in conclusions to this game, we can draw a few conclusions. Yeah, knight b5 was a nice trick. There were even better moves available from the computer perspective, like knight g5, but he gave up his dark square bishop. But black was still in big trouble because of that gigantic pawn on c7, and in the end, it was this pin on the d file, which was black's demise, as well as this weakness of the diagonal. An interesting encounter between the two. Okay, comments, questions, likes appreciated. Thanks very much.